Friday night and the lights are low.
She was the voice of light in a band that changed the sound of the world. But behind every note of joy, there was distance, a silence that fans could never quite explain. For decades, Agnetha Fältskog lived inside mystery, the golden voice of ABBA, and the ghost who walked away from it.
We don't know, really.
No.
It must be something with the sound, I think.
Now, after years of quiet, she has finally confirmed what many always believed, that the story of ABBA was never about endings. It was about finding peace in the echoes left behind. Here's what Agnetha Fältskog finally admitted, and why it changes how we remember ABBA, the voice that defined an era. From the first bars of Dancing Queen, the world felt something luminous. Agnetha's voice didn't just carry melody, it carried memory. Every note shimmered with joy and quiet ache, a balance between light and longing. Hers was a sound that didn't need perfection to feel eternal, it needed honesty. And honesty, for her, always sang in minor keys. Agnetha wasn't simply the lead singer of ABBA, she was its emotional compass. When she sang, it felt less like performance, and more like confession. Her tone, crystal yet trembling, held something impossible to imitate, vulnerability that never lost control. It wasn't just technique, it was presence. Listeners felt she was speaking directly to them, quietly, in a language only emotion could translate. She once reflected, "When I sing, I see the picture in my mind. I have to feel it." That's what made her voice different. It wasn't decoration, it was storytelling. In SOS, or Knowing Me, Knowing You, her phrasing turned heartbreak into architecture. Every pause deliberate, every breath a sentence of its own. Even in moments of pop euphoria, there was always shadow beneath the glitter.
Baby, baby, you're out of sight.
Benny Andersson often said her clarity could cut through any arrangement, and he was right. No matter how layered the production, Agnetha's tone carried through like light on glass. It defined the band's emotional center, the part that made millions dance, but also, quietly, ache. Another critic once wrote, "She sang joy as if she already knew it would leave." That paradox, bright sadness, elegant restraint, is what turned a Swedish pop group into myth. Agnetha didn't just define the sound of ABBA, she defined its humanity, because behind every anthem, her voice whispered something timeless, that even in joy, there's always something worth missing, the price of perfection. Behind the polish and sequins was exhaustion. ABBA's success demanded constant movement, tours, interviews, rehearsals, and left little space for stillness. Agnetha once described the crowds as beautiful but frightening. Fame, she realized, wasn't applause. It was a form of exposure. To survive, she began stepping back, not from music, but from the noise surrounding it. By the late 1970s, ABBA had become a machine built on precision. Every gesture, every harmony, every photo was expected to shine. But under the lights, Agnetha began to feel the cost. Endless travel meant nights without sleep, birthdays missed, and moments that blurred together under fluorescent dressing room mirrors. "You're adored, but also trapped inside that adoration," said by Agnetha, reflecting on fame. The songs mirrored that strain. "The winner takes it all" sounded triumphant, but to her, it was emotional excavation, truth hidden in melody. Benny and Björn wrote, she delivered, but it was her voice that turned those words into ache. The more perfect ABBA's image became, the more she longed for imperfection, silence, space, the sound of ordinary life returning.
Something was not as it was, so I had to take some lessons to...
Even within the band, tension simmered quietly. Success meant everyone expected more albums, more tours, more smiles. Agnetha once said she felt like she was running in heels through a storm. The world saw glamour. She felt fatigue. And yet, even in that exhaustion, she never lost discipline. Every note stayed precise. Every harmony landed where it belonged. That professionalism, admired and misunderstood, became her armor. Agnetha could sing through heartbreak and make it sound effortless, said by a bandmate describing her focus. The price of perfection wasn't failure, it was distance. She gave the world brilliance, but what she kept for herself was peace. And in the years that followed, she would learn that peace was worth far more than applause. The years of silence. When ABBA ended, Agnetha didn't vanish. She retreated. Her island home in Sweden became sanctuary, not exile. She called it balance. The world called it mystery. For years, she sang quietly, away from cameras and nostalgia. That stillness, misunderstood by many, was her rebellion. "You can't live your whole life on stage," she once told a friend. The press called her reclusive, but that was never the truth. Agnetha was building a quieter rhythm, morning walks, homemade meals, laughter echoing through a small kitchen instead of stadiums. The world assumed she was lonely. She was actually free. "Music should come to you, not chase you," said by Agnetha, reflecting on her withdrawal from fame. In 1983, she released "Wrap Your Arms Around Me," not to reignite a career, but to remind herself she still had a voice. The songs were tender, unguarded, an artist at peace with imperfection. For fans, it felt like a letter from someone they'd lost. For her, it was proof that music could exist without pressure.
Wrap your arms around me, let your love surround me.
She gave few interviews, but when she did, her tone was calm, almost amused by the obsession surrounding her privacy. "It was a beautiful time, but life has other songs too," said by Agnetha in a reflective interview years later. Her silence became its own kind of melody, steady, mysterious, and deeply human. Where other stars chased relevance, she chased stillness. Every year away from the spotlight added to her myth, but she wasn't interested in myth-making. She was interested in living. Agnetha's retreat wasn't disappearance, it was endurance. In the quiet corners of her island, she proved that sometimes the loudest legacy is the one that doesn't need to be heard at all. The return no one expected. Decades later, the impossible happened. ABBA returned. Voyage wasn't a comeback, it was a reckoning. Agnetha's voice, gentler but intact, carried decades of living inside it. She hesitated at first, unsure if the magic could survive time, but when the music began, she felt it, the unbroken thread that had never really left her. The idea started as a whisper, no tours, no spectacle, just music. It had been 40 years since their last studio album, and each member carried a different life behind them. But when they gathered again in Stockholm, something clicked. The tension of old wounds dissolved in the rhythm of creation. It felt natural, like no time had passed, said by Agnetha in an interview reflecting on the sessions. Recording felt both familiar and foreign. Technology had changed, but their bond had not. Agnetha approached the microphone with the same quiet confidence as before, her tone softer, richer, weathered by life. The producers described her takes as fragile yet fearless, like someone finally at peace with her past.
It's the outside world as you imagine.
The songs were less about youth and more about grace. The lyrics spoke of trust, forgiveness, and the strange beauty of second chances. There was no pressure anymore, only music, said by Agnetha, recalling her first day back in the studio. Fans called it nostalgia. For Agnetha, it was closure. After decades of silence, the stage lights didn't blind her. They warmed her. Voyage wasn't an ending or a return to glory. It was a homecoming. 4 voices reuniting not to relive the past, but to honor it, together, one final time. And as the last note faded, the world didn't just hear ABBA again, it heard time itself, singing, what she finally confirmed. In a rare moment of openness, Agnetha said what everyone long suspected. ABBA's songs weren't crafted for radio, they were lived. "We were telling our truth," she admitted. Every lyric, every harmony was drawn from love, fracture, and forgiveness. That admission redefined the band's legacy, not as escapism, but as emotional autobiography, disguised in melody. For years, fans speculated about the real stories behind ABBA's lyrics. Agnetha finally put those doubts to rest. The emotion, she said, wasn't performance, it was memory. Songs like "The Winner Takes It All" and "One of Us" weren't fictional heartbreaks. They were the reflections of lives intertwined by art, love, and time. "The songs were our diaries," said by Agnetha, explaining how truth shaped their music. Each song carried more than melody, it carried experience. The harmonies that sounded effortless were the result of pain translated into beauty. What audiences heard as pop brilliance was, to Agnetha, a process of healing. She once described the studio as a confessional wrapped in rhythm, a place where she could turn private struggle into public strength. Her acknowledgement changed how listeners heard the band. No longer was ABBA just a symbol of glitter and joy. It became something deeper, a mirror of imperfection made universal. The emotions were real, but we never needed to explain them, said by Agnetha when asked about the band's storytelling. That honesty is what kept their music alive. Beneath the gloss was truth, raw, complicated, enduring. When she finally confirmed it, the illusion didn't vanish. It evolved, because ABBA's legacy was never built on mystery. It was built on humanity, and Agnetha's voice remains its most honest witness, the legacy that refuses to fade. Today, Agnetha no longer chases spotlight or chart. Her influence lives in the silence between notes, in every artist who learned that restraint can feel louder than volume. She doesn't need to return. She's already echoed through generations. When she finally speaks, it's not nostalgia, it's peace, the kind that only truth can leave behind. The decades since ABBA's rise have turned her voice into a study in sincerity. Pop singers, indie artists, even jazz vocalists name her as an influence, each citing the same thing: control and emotion, perfectly balanced. She could make a whisper feel like a crescendo, said by a producer describing her lasting impact. The legacy of that sound stretches far beyond hits. It lives in phrasing, in poise, in the ability to make vulnerability sound strong. You can hear it in the restraint of Adele, the intimacy of Norah Jones, the purity of Florence Welch. They may never have met her, but they've all inherited her honesty. Even as technology transformed music, Agnetha's recordings stayed timeless. The emotional core, her voice, needed no filters. If a song can reach one person and make them feel less alone, that's success, said by Agnetha, reflecting on what truly matters in performance. That line defines her legacy better than any chart position could. She showed the world that the measure of art isn't volume, but truth. Her music doesn't demand attention. It earns it, quietly, steadily, endlessly. Agnetha Fältskog doesn't need another stage to prove her relevance. Her voice has already become part of culture's heartbeat, a reminder that even after the echo fades, the feeling remains. And that is where immortality begins. Time changes everything, except truth. Agnetha Fältskog's journey reminds us that legacy isn't built by volume or headlines, but by the quiet persistence of sincerity. She sang with grace, lived with restraint, and proved that authenticity can outlast any era of fame. Her silence was never absence, it was meaning. ABBA's music still fills arenas, but Agnetha's story lingers in the spaces between applause, in the gentle proof that art, shaped by honesty, never fades. She didn't chase immortality. She earned it through courage, vulnerability, and the kind of voice that could turn memory into sound. Her confirmation, her peace, her quiet return, all of it forms one lasting echo. That truth, once sung, never stops resonating. What do you think of Agnetha's revelation? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more untold stories behind the music.